Welcome, Boo-Rai Nation, as I refer to what I hope will eventually be a fairly large fan base for me. Welcome to my third video for YouTube. Today, as I promised at the end of my last video, where I discuss the Hot Rod Rodimus Prime controversy in G1, G2 Transformers from the 1980s. Today I'm going to be kind of taking an in-depth look into the original series that created the phenomenon that we know in America as Power Rangers. That series is Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, seasons 1 through 3, and the original film. And as you can see, my awesome Megazord shirt that I chose to wear for this video, and I will probably wear for every video I make after this for the Power Rangers side of things. Thank you. I appreciate the any and all love I get for this shirt. But let's dig into it. G1 or Mighty Morphin is the series that literally started off the phenomenon of Power Rangers in America. And that's all well and good, but first we have to kind of, if we want to understand G1, I need to touch briefly on essentially what inspired Mighty Morphin in the first place. And for that, you have to go back nearly 20 years before the premiere episode of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Season 1, Episode 1, Day of the Dumpster, when a phenomenon known as Metal Heroes, or the Metal Hero series, started in Japan. I've watched some of the early stuff. Like, I've watched multiple episodes, like the first 5 or 6 episodes of the original Super Sentai series. Go Ranger, I believe it was called. I mean, you could check on that. I may not be entirely accurate. Matter of fact, I'll even double check myself on that. I apologize for looking away, but I have my laptop behind me and I'm going to be using that for referencing material and things of that nature. So, okay. The original Super Sentai series was called Himitsu Sentai Go Ranger, and it aired from 1975 to 1977. So very close to 20 years before the start of Power Rangers in America. Now, the series of Go Ranger is what kicked off, in many ways, what's referred to as the Metal Hero series in Japan. And we got in America, we got a lot of stuff from them, thanks to Saban, that became Americanized. I think that's the best word to use for what happened to these shows. Beetleborgs started as a Metal Hero series in Japan. VR Troopers started as a Metal Hero series in Japan. I think Mystic Knights of Tir na Nog may have been a Metal Hero series at some point in Japan. I don't know for sure. I'd have to look that up. But bottom line is the Metal Hero series is the true start, at least in my personal opinion, of the popularization of superhero shows, either live action or animated, in the world. True superhero shows. Now, the show that the show that the first season of Mighty Morphin is based on is called Kyoru Sentai Ztyranger. And I apologize for mangling the pronunciations. Um, I don't speak Japanese, at least not very much, and the few words I know, I only know through movies and TV shows and a few comic books and books that I've read where I've been able to somehow, by a miracle of the goddess, I've been able to learn how to pronounce those particular terms correctly, or at least as correctly as I can. So if you hear me mangle a Japanese name, I do apologize. It's not an intentional thing. I just don't really speak Japanese. But you also have to remember that the first 3 seasons of Mighty Morphing, plus the season that we call, well, the mini season that we called Alien Rangers in America, are based upon 3 or 4 separate seasons of Super Sentai in Japan. In '92, they had the series that we took and made Mighty Morphin Season 1, and that's the season called Ztyranger. Seasons 2 and 3 of Mighty Morphin, and to a certain degree the film, the original film back in 1997? No. It would have been like 1995. Was based on a mixture of the seasons Gosei Sentai Ztyranger and Ninja Sentai Kakuranger. First off, I will say the Sentais are well worth a watch. They really are. If you want to know where to go to find them, just send me a message on Facebook. I'll tell you where to go. I have a site that I use to watch all of it, and it's worth taking the time to watch and do a Sentai versus Ranger comparison, because you'll notice there are huge differences. Now, one of Saban's goals with creating Power Rangers was he made a deal with whatever company in Japan at the time was in control of the Super Sentai series to use their battle footage and maybe a few other things here and there to create Power Rangers. But he didn't want, and I understand this. I understand this completely. I don't fault this particular decision on the part of Haim Saban. He didn't want Power Rangers to just be Super Sentai in America with English. Okay, that's not what he wanted. He was already basically doing that with shows like Digimon, which a lot of people tend to forget if they're fans of the show. Digimon is a Haim Saban production. He started that phenomenon in America too. Just like he started Yu-Gi-Oh! In America, if my memory serves me correctly. I believe Haim Saban was behind the original series for Yu-Gi-Oh! But I don't believe that Haim wanted to just take each separate episode of each of the Sentais that he used for the creation of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers seasons 1 through 3 and then the mini-season Alien Ranger and just directly transfer it. He wanted to work with it a little bit and put his own vision on those Sentais. And he did. He certainly did. The big question is, did he do it well? And that's one of the things I kind of want to touch on. Now, season 1 of Mighty Morphin was pretty much a direct translation in many ways of the show called the Sentai called Ztyranger in Japan. We had the same rangers, the same powers, the same weapons, mostly the same enemies. Um, the major differences came in backstories and locations. Obviously, it was all set in uh, a potentially fictional area of California called Angel Grove. There may actually be an Angel Grove, California. I don't know. I haven't ever bothered to look it up. I don't see a need to. But the story setting itself was a fictional Angel Grove set in California. I'm guessing somewhere in Northern California by the setting and whatever. Um, Obviously, there was only one Asian on the team, that being Trini Kwan, played by the phenomenal actress Tai Trang. Again, I apologize if I mangle that name. I don't really know how to pronounce it correctly. I just do the best I can. And this brings us up to one of the first controversies, and probably the major controversy of the series, because this went for a season and a half. Um, and that being the question of whether or not three of the Ranger colors were this not so subtle form of racism. That being the Yellow Ranger, Trini Kwan, the Asian Ranger of the series. The Black Ranger, played by, God, I can't think of his name off the top of my head. His character name was Zachary, or Zach, or the Zach Attack for a nickname. Walter Emmanuel Jones, that's his name. And then, well, I mean, those were the two that were really kind of racist. The other one was not really racism so much as stereotyping. That being Pink for Kimberly, played by the great Amy Jo Johnson. And Jason Scott Lee, played by the great Austin St. John, being the Red Ranger. The backgrounds that they were given, I mean, there was a lot to this controversy. It was about backgrounds, it was about assigned Ranger colors, things of that nature. The stereotype controversy, I think, was at least semi-intentional on Saban's part for Jason and Kim. Because, I mean, if you look at the backgrounds that the characters have, both in the comics, the TV shows, and the films, Jason is the stereotypical jock that you see portrayed in so many films. Kim is definitely the stereotypical Valley Girl cheerleader that you see again portrayed in so many TV shows and so many movies. So I think that was a poke. I don't think it was intended as a slight or an insult by Haim Saban to create those characters in that fashion. I think Haim was more aiming towards kind of poking fun at those stereotypes in a kid's show. That's how I see it, and I think a lot of fans would probably agree with me on that. Now, what I don't necessarily agree with in terms of the controversy involved with the show is the alleged racism of Trini and Zach being assigned the Yellow Ranger costume, or the Yellow Ranger and the Black Ranger, respectively. I don't see that as really being a racism poke by Haim Saban in terms of him being racist about those characters. Although there is some evidence in like character story backgrounds and histories that kind of would support the racism argument. And also a stereotype argument. about those two characters. Because you have Zach, who is the black character on the show, the main black character. And Zach he's a street dancer, a break dancer. He invented his own form of martial arts that involves break dancing and street dancing. And you got to remember, this show started in the early to mid 1990s, where that was kind of a thing. That was mostly associated with African Americans at the time. And then, you had Trini Kwan, who, I mean, obviously spoke with a really good American accent. You really couldn't tell any Asian accent when she spoke. You get this character who it's stereotype leading into racism argument for Trini Kwan, in the sense that you get a character whose background is her parents or grandparents came to America from Japan. She's steeped in martial arts. Many traditional Asian traditions is the word I'm looking for here. Things of that nature. So it's a stereotype of Asian peoples that's a direct lead into a potential racism argument for her character. If anything, my personal opinion on the subject, on the matter, is that I think Haim Saban was really just kind of, like he was doing with Jason and Kim, he was, I think, trying to poke fun at these stereotypes and these racisms that exist and still exist to this day about those particular types of people and or races. I feel it was his intention to poke fun at that, but the people who argue that it was just a straight up racist thing to do on the part of Haim Saban, well, I don't think that they really understand the intention there. Then again, I may not understand the intention there entirely. This is my opinion, based as a fan who has watched all of it from day one. I have been a Power Ranger fan since they debuted Day of the Dumpster way back in like 1993. So I've been there for many, many years. In a lot of ways, I grew up, like many fans, I grew up with the various series. And in some ways, each series has influenced my life decisions and my life choices to some degree, including deciding to finally start doing some videos discussing each individual series. So, take that as you will. There are definitely arguments that can be made on either side of that particular controversy. But now that we've got that out of the way, let's kind of get into season 1 itself of Mighty Morphin. And I feel that at this point, at least for those of you who have not watched the Super Sentai series, Ztyranger, I need to do a spoiler alert right here, right now. Because I will spoil some of what occurs in Ztyranger and some of the differences. When I talk about the differences between the Japanese version of the character and the American version, there will be spoilers there as well. So, and there are going to be spoilers off and on throughout this video, more than likely. Most of them shouldn't be too big. I don't think any of them should take away from your enjoyment in watching the series or the Sentai. That's on you. as a viewer. But I will be discussing some of these differences. And if you don't want to hear about that before you watch the Sentai, if that's the choice you're going to make here, then come back to this video another day, please. Otherwise, for those who stay with the video from this point on, spoiler alert, and please enjoy this discussion on my part. So here's the thing. First off, the biggest change is the difference between Bandora and her American counterpart, Rita Repulsa. Now, in terms of appearance and general behavior, she's the same person. She is exactly the same in Japan as she is in America in terms of general behavior choices and general just appearance, period. In terms of character backstory, that's where the major differences come in. Now, in America, Rita Repulsa is this witch who's over 10,000 years old, who was involved in the original war in some way, shape, or form against Zordon and his allies 10,000 years ago. And at some point, her and her little crew, Babu Squat, Scorpina, Goldar, and Fencer, were all imprisoned in that space dumpster on Earth's moon. And they don't really explain in detail what exactly happened at that point. They basically just said there was this big battle or series of battles, and at the end of it, we chased off Lord Zed, or he chose to go to somewhere else because we were too much trouble at the time, and we imprisoned Rita and her cronies, and we had peace in this solar system for 10,000 years. That's all that's really said. So there's that. I will, because I don't know how far into this I want to really get in this particular video. I will do some more background checking at a later point, but I've done that off and on over the years, and I've never really seen much that explains that particular period in Power Ranger history. Now, in Japan, the story is the start of the story for Ztyranger in Japan is completely different than the start of Power Rangers in America. One of the major differences, at least as I see it, is that in Ztyranger, all 6 Power Rangers in the series had their powers to begin with. 5 of them with their mentor, who I don't remember the mentor's name. Give me a moment here. I'm trying to look up the name of the mentor. The Mysterious Sage Barza is the name of the mentor in Ztyranger. He's millions of years old. Literally millions of years old at the start of Ztyranger. Because the basic synopsis at the beginning of the series is that millions and millions of years ago, towards the end of the Age of Dinosaurs, there were several human kingdoms that more or less lived in harmony with dinosaurs. And then this big fight broke out. One of the human kingdoms produced the witch Bandora, who you discover later in the series, her child dies. This is the reason why it's a recurring theme throughout Ztyranger, that she hates children with passion. Like she just despises kids and wants nothing to do with them, wants to kill them all. Like that's like one of the biggest character flaws, if not the biggest character flaw for the character of Bandora in Ztyranger, is her absolute despisal and hatred of children. And it stemmed because her child got to an accident and died. She blamed another kingdom and started this major war, and that war was more or less the reason that the dinosaur age ended in Ztyranger. But towards the end of the war, when her forces were primarily beaten, but the heroes were also primarily beaten, the heroes were encased in stasis, kind of stasis. Like this, if I remember right, it was some kind of like crystalline enclosure that they were placed in, and they were put in a stasis sleep, only to be awoken if and when their powers were needed to battle Bandora once more. Goldar is called like Gryffindor or something like that in Japan. I'm trying to look up the names of some of the characters. Kai is the son of Bandora. He was the prince of the Dal tribe, I think is how it's pronounced. You have Griffo-Zur, who is Goldar to us in America. You have Lafney and Totpat, who are, Totpat and Bookbach, I believe, were the American, what we called in America, Squat and Goldar, or Squat and Babu. Lammy, I believe, was Finster. And then, or Finster was Piperchon, one of the two. Let me look up Lammy. Oh, okay. Lammy was Scorpina in Japan. That's who it was. So, Piperchon, again, I'm pretty sure I don't pronounce that correctly, is what we call Finster in America. And then the golems were what we call putties. So, one of the big goals of Bandora was the destruction of all children, which would eventually lead to the destruction of all life and civilization on the planet of Earth. Another one of her big goals was to destroy the Sentai Ztyranger. Now, another interesting difference between Goldar and Scorpina versus Lammy and Griffo-Zur, again, I'm pretty sure I don't pronounce that correctly. I apologize. I pronounce it the best I can. Is that in America, Goldar and Scorpina were kind of enemies. They didn't really like each other very much. They were very competitive. And they worked together, but basically only when the situation really forced them to it, or when Rita forced them to it. In Japan, Griffo-Zur and Lammy are married. And at the end of the series, you find out that they're having a child together. after they get re-imprisoned with Bandora and the rest of that gang. So, I mean, I think that's a difference that if it had traversed into Power Rangers, I think could have improved the show 5 or tenfold. I would have absolutely adored seeing Goldar and Scorpina married. I would have adored the revelation at some point towards the end of Mighty Morphin Season 1 that Scorpina was pregnant, that her and Goldar were having a child. All that would have been just absolutely amazing, in my opinion. And if this video allows comments, please tell me what you think of that idea with Mighty Morphin Season 1. Do you think that would have been a good idea and why, or a bad idea and why? Personally, I love the thought of it. I love the idea that Goldar and Scorpina were married as their Japanese counterparts. I'm not really a big fan of how either character played out in Power Rangers itself. I really think that between so-called censorship and Saban's desire to break away from the Sentai as much as he could so that he could individualize Power Rangers for mainly an American audience, I think those were really bad decisions. And I think it really stole away a lot of potential quality for the show. And every successive show that came after Mighty Morphin. But it is what it is, and we have to deal with the aftermath and the consequences of the choices that Saban made at that time. One thing that didn't really change between Ztyranger and Power Rangers is the fact that Squat and Babu, aka Bookback and Top Pat, were still very close friends and worked heavily together anytime they got a chance to, of their own willing accord. Okay, that's the way it was for those characters in Japan, and that really carried over to their characterizations in America in the Power Ranger series. So I think that's a good decision. Because it showed some cohesion, some real genuine cohesion among Rita's forces. And no, I don't count the putties or golems as they were called in Japan because they're just mindless beings of clay that have no real capacity to think on their own. They have to be led by somebody or something. Or they just kind of wander around and do whatever the hell they want. So they don't count. But speaking of putties and golems played out basically the same way in both Power Rangers and Ztyranger. So there were some things that carried over relatively true from Ztyranger to Mighty Morphin. There were some things here and there that did carry over, and I appreciate that happened. I really do. I think that's fantastic. I love it. But there were things that didn't carry over from Ztyranger to Power Rangers that I'm not a big fan of those choices being made. Like I said, I don't like the fact that Goldar and Scorpina weren't married in the American Power Rangers, but they are married and end up having a kid. Or that we know they're pregnant with a child together, at the very least. We don't actually see them have the child, that I recall, in Ztyranger. A major character difference for Bandora versus Rita is she actually had a theme song. The character of Bandora has her literal own theme song that everybody in her roster will sing when she starts singing it. And it's absolutely one of the most amazing things I've seen in Super Sentai ever. And I have watched every Super Sentai starting from Ztyranger on up to the current Super Sentai Kiramager. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but you know what I mean. It's the newest Super Sentai currently going on in Japan. I'm a little bit behind on it, and I'll be catching up on that soon, but you know, it is what it is. But yeah, it was great. Like, let me I'm gonna go to YouTube here, and I'm gonna if I can find it, I'm gonna play a clip of the song. It's so much fun. It shows a lighter-hearted side to Ztyranger, which is really, in the end, it turns out to be a way more serious series than you realize when you first start watching it. Like, the first half of it is kind of sort of lighthearted and kind of sort of not. The second half of it is it gets really dark. Like, seriously dark. In a lot of ways, really scary. Here it is. I hope you guys can hear this. Okay, that's enough of that. That just kind of that gives you an idea. Again, I apologize for my hand being in a frame and all. I'm using my cell phone to record this video, so that's going to happen sometimes. But that gives you an idea of what I'm talking about with the theme song. I mean, the theme song, like, the lyrics are pretty dark. She talks about a lot of different things, but one of the primary messages is her hatred of kids and what she wants to do to kids, how she wants to get rid of them, and a lot of things she could do to accomplish that particular goal. But when you listen to it, like, you listen to the music, the beat, you listen to the refrain, Dora, 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 blah, 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 Bandora. It's just so fun to listen to. Like, if you're not reading the words, if you're not watching it with the subtitle and you don't read the words of the song, you never realize how dark that song can get. And you just listen to a tune that's really catchy. And that's all there is. And again, like, that's probably the biggest difference between any Power Ranger series and any Super Sentai series. I've talked about this in posts on Facebook and various Power Ranger groups and stuff like that. I want to make this absolutely clear right here, right now. You can try to argue this all day long, but this is fact. Okay, it's straight up fact. Japan is not afraid to expose their kids to the dark side of life from day one. From the day they are conceived to the day they die. They are not afraid to admit that they do this. They're not afraid to admit that they over-sexualize their children, or that they do anything that could twist the minds of their kids and their youth. And if you look at the results, honestly, in that sense, they have a much better culture than we do here in America. Because here in America, we use quote-unquote censorship. Yeah, like, that works for shit. Because the bottom line is, here in America, plain and simple, we do the exact same thing that Japan does. The difference is we lie to the world about what we do. We claim, no, we use censorship so we don't expose our kids to sex and violence and drugs and gang wars and death and all of this other shit from basically the day that they're conceived. But that is an absolute lie. If you look back just on your own life, unless you live in a family that shelters you to an extremist degree, not a single one of you was not exposed to sex, drugs, violence, and death from a very early age. Not a single one of you did not have access to movies or TV shows or books that expose these things to you from day one, essentially. I know I damn sure was exposed to it very early. I started reading when I was about 4 years old. Is when I started getting into various forms of media, and I started with reading. I read newspapers, I read books, and things like that, magazines, whatever I could get my hands onto. I was exposed early to all of those concepts. I saw the dark side of life from day one. And I'm not going to sit here and lie to people, say we don't do that in America. We do. We very much do. Americans are just as exposed to these kind of themes and the dark side of life from day one as Japanese kids are. The only real difference is we lie and claim that we use censorship when we don't. Basically, the censorship bureau, the people in government that are supposed to do censorship basically sit on their ass and don't do shit. And we waste tons of government money every year on this, and we don't get any real results out of it. It's sad, it's pathetic, and it's the biggest lie that Americans try to tell the world. And I'm disgusted with it. It annoys me, it disgusts me, and it pisses me off that we do it. But I can't change that it happens. So that's one thing that if you're interested in watching Super Sentai and then maybe comparing the parent Sentai to the Power Rangers show that's based on it, that is going to be the biggest freaking difference you're going to see between Power Rangers and Sentai. Power Rangers is essentially, except for RPM, and to a degree, maybe Jungle Fury and Samurai, is very lighthearted. The various companies over the years that have done Power Ranger shows, Saban, Disney, and now Hasbro, really work hard to try to lighten the tone of the Sentais for America. And we lose when that happens. We really, 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 really lose in Power Rangers when we don't allow some of those darker themes and concepts from the parent Super Sentais to transfer and translate directly into the Power Ranger shows. And this brings me to one of the biggest differences between Ztyranger, the parent Sentai, and Mighty Morphin Season 1. And that is the characters of Burai versus Tommy Oliver. Now, the start of the difference is that Burai in the Sentai, who is the Green Dragon Caesar, that's what his Zord is called, that's what his power set is the power set of Dragon Caesar, is the brother to the Tyrannosaurus Ranger in the Sentai. The guy's name is Goki. Goki and Burai are literal brothers who millions of years ago, before Goki and his team were put in stasis, essentially, they started off as allies. And then I don't remember exactly what happened, but something happened that created this massive rift in their relationship, and they ended fighting as enemies. And eventually, huge spoiler for Ztyranger right here. If you don't want to hear it, skip ahead about a minute or so, 30 seconds to a minute. Burai ends up dying before that war ends, and right about the same time that the Ztyrangers are put in stasis. Tommy is in no way, shape, or form actually related to Jason or any Ranger that he ever fights alongside of in any team up episode or any series that he's involved with. The only relation to Tommy that you get is his real life brother, who the goddess rest his soul, passed away years ago, shortly after his appearances in Power Ranger Zeo. And that was, I believe the man's name was Eric, if I remember correctly. If I don't, please let me know, either through Facebook or comments on this video. But that was the only brother that was ever truly related to Tommy. Now, Tommy called Jason his brother, and in metaphorical terms, they were in a lot of ways. But they weren't actually biologically related like Goki and Burai are in Ztyranger. Now, at the start of Ztyranger, what we don't find out is that Burai had been imprisoned in this weird alternate dimensional, I think it was a dimensional pocket of some kind, where he had the ability to leave if he wished, but the longer he was gone, the less time he could remain quote-unquote alive in this pocket of space and time that was separated from the Ztyranger universe. This weird dimension he was trapped in had some really funky qualities, and I don't remember all of it. But eventually, about mid-series, and you got to remember, Ztyranger is like 50 episodes, somewhere around there, which is about average for a Sentai series. The lowest I can remember seeing episode-wise for any Sentai that I've watched so far has been like 47 to 48 episodes for the entire series. And it's all one season. I mean, they pop episodes damn near every week of the year for the year that series is on TV. Some I've seen go up to 52 to 54 episodes, which means they go about a year to a little over a year, give or take. It depends on the series. So you have that, and that's also a huge difference between most parent Sentais compared to their Power Ranger children. But this is one of the most major differences between Ztyranger and Power Rangers, because you lose in the translation from Ztyranger to Power Rangers Mighty Morphin Season 1. You lose what I think is one of the most essential relationships, if not the most essential relationship in the entire series. It would have been a much lighter and a much more fun Sentai to watch if you did not have the tragedy that was the character of Burai and his relationship to the Red Ranger, Geki. Geki. I was pronouncing that right. That made, in terms of sub storylines in any Super Sentai or any Power Ranger, I see this tragic storyline between these two characters, involving these two characters, Geki and Burai, as making one of the biggest overall impacts on the overall storyline for Ztyranger of any Power Ranger or Sentai series ever made. It's an epic, tragic, sad, turns into a happy tale that is just phenomenal. I love it. I wish it had translated over. Unfortunately, it didn't. But I'm kind of getting off track, and I'm at 50 minutes now for this recording. I'm going to try to keep it to about an hour, so I'm only going to cover season 1 and Ztyranger. So you have that. Eventually, Geki ends up joining, or Burai ends up joining the Ztyrangers, just like Tommy ends up joining the Power Rangers. The difference there with how that works is that Burai was never truly evil. He wasn't under a spell or any of that kind of BS like they did with Tommy. He was just misguided by Bandora. And again, he had died millennia ago. So there's that. But eventually he ends up teaming up with them. Eventually he hands his powers when his time is up in the living world. He hands his powers to Geki so that they still have access to Dragon Caesar. And, you know, the story goes on, the series goes on until eventually Bandora is beaten. Her gang is re-imprisoned in the space dumpster, and they're kicked off the planet. And not so much how things ended with Mighty Morphin Season 1. She was re-imprisoned, but it was Lord Zed who did it, who, as no Japanese counterpart, he's a completely American villain, the first completely American villain. Let me remind you. So that's history making in and of itself. Blah, blah, blah. And for anybody who's watched Mighty Morphin, you know how it goes. If I had to do a rating system of 1 to 10, I would rate Ztyranger at about an 8.5 overall. And that's taking into account every category, you know, filming, the actors, the scripts, the overall storylines, the subplots, the villains, the sub-villains, the main villains. I mean, all of that, everything that goes into making that kind of a show. I give it an overall rating of 8.5. I think the series was pretty fantastic. And to this day, it remains one of my favorite Sentais. Now we get the Power Rangers. Mighty Morphin Season 1. I think the best rating I can give it is about a 5.5 to a 6. And I hear people out there already hating on me for this. Okay? For giving it that rating. Let me tell you why. First off, while the Power Rangers themselves, the Power Ranger actors themselves were really good, for pretty much all of them being brand new actors, this being really their first gig. And I love Jason Narvi and the guy that played Bulk. I mean, greatest comedy duo of all time in Power Rangers history. Easily. There's no question of that. But even with all of that, you still had so much that either sucked or was okay, but could have used a lot of improvement. There were a lot of script screw-ups. There were a lot of really just piss-poor scripts themselves. The main cast had, especially in the first half of Season 1, had really bad acting chops. I mean, they really had to grow into their roles. A lot of the reason it gets a 5.5 to a 6 rating out of 10 is nostalgia. And the nostalgia is because really Mighty Morphin is what started the phenomenon. So you do have to give Mighty Morphin some credit for that. Flip side of the coin, you really have to look at the quality of the series overall. And if you're being honest, the quality was not all that great until really late into season one, is when the quality really started to amp up. Monsters started to look better, had better lines in most episodes in the last quarter of season one. Storylines became vastly more epic. Although, admittingly, the greatest subplot in season one was Green with Evil parts 1 through 5. I don't think any fan of the series will ever question that. That is the greatest subplot in season one. Hell, that's probably the greatest subplot in the Mighty Morphin season 1 through 3. Let's be real about it. That was a great subplot. And it was probably the best way to introduce Tommy in the series. Now, speaking of Tommy, he wasn't intended to be a series mainstay. Saban and his team have admitted that before. He was intended to come in, be in there for maybe half a season, give or take a little bit, and then leave, lose his powers and go. Kind of like Burai did in Ztyranger. Except Burai was always intended to be a main player for the series. The attention behind the character of Tommy Oliver was never what it became later on after the end of season one. So, I mean, that adds to the quality of the series because, let's be real, Jason David Frank is a great actor. He's a great martial artist. He brought every skill that was needed for his character to the table. And every appearance he gives, he continues to bring those skills to the table. He continues to be just phenomenal in his role as an evolving character of Dr. Tommy Oliver. But even with that saving grace coming in pretty early in season one, let's be real, season one really didn't end that well in terms of overall quality. So 5.5 to a 6 compared to Ztyranger's 8.5. Pretty solid 8.5. Potentially pushing a 9 rating. It's just, it is the way it is. I mean, when I judge a series, I'm looking at everything. Okay? So I base my ratings based on how I feel about everything about that show. So take it as it is. Let me hear your opinions. I am Zimby7979 79 at hotmail.com or Zimby7979 at gmail.com on Facebook. Joshua Zimmerman is my name. Just look me up. Feel free to add me. I'd be happy to hear your opinions on this and my 2 previous videos. I am Darth Zimby, I believe it is, on Twitch. Let me bring up my Twitch page. Although I don't really have a lot of Twitch videos up. But if you look up Darth Zimby or Darth Burai on Twitch, you'll find me. Obviously, if you're looking at this on YouTube, you've already got my name. So there's that. So feel free to get a hold of me. I would love to hear your comments on my videos. I would love to engage in discussions with you on my various topics. Next week, and I apologize, I intended for this to be up Monday, or for me to do this video on Monday. And unfortunately, real life intervened, and I wasn't able to post this when I wanted to. So, there's that. I will be posting this tonight to my YouTube page. And if I can figure out how to make it work, I will upload this from my YouTube to my Twitch page. And I will post my Twitch and Facebook links onto my YouTube in my profile so that you guys can get a hold of me. So that ends this week's discussion. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Season 1. Please follow. Please give me a like. And hopefully you'll tune in. Next week will be a discussion on the G1, G2 Transformer series. So, this is Darth Zimby signing off.